Chapter 1. The Call. Carter Montgomery had always suspected fluorescent lights were plotting against him. They hummed above his desk like judgmental bees, casting a sterile glow over spreadsheets that looked more like punishment than progress. Marketing metrics, supply chain forecasts, numbers that had once thrilled him now felt like a cage. He leaned back in his chair, staring at the skyline outside his office window. Glass towers glittered in the California sun, a postcard of success. But Carter didn't feel successful. He felt tired. Tired of meetings that could have been emails. Tired of emails that could have been nothing at all. His phone buzzed. Mom. He smiled despite himself. Helen Montgomery never called during work hours unless it was important, or unless she'd found a new way to remind him that grandchildren don't just appear like Amazon packages. He swiped to answer. Hey, Mom. Everything okay? Her voice came through warm and steady, but with an edge that made his stomach tighten. Carter. Honey, your dad had an accident. He sat up straighter. What? Is he? He's fine, she rushed to say. Well, mostly fine. He fell at the hardware store. Broke his leg in 2 places. Doctor says he'll be bedridden for a few months. Carter exhaled slowly, relief washing over him. Okay, that's not great, but at least he's going to be okay. Yes, but you know your father, Helen continued, her tone sharpening like a teacher about to assign homework. He's already grumbling about all the work piling up, and I can't run the store and teach at the same time. Carter closed his eyes. He could picture it perfectly. Clive Montgomery, king of Sherwood's hardware empire, stuck in bed like a lion in a cage, roaring about missed sales and broken lawnmowers. So, Helen said, drawing out the word like a fishing line, I was wondering if you could take some vacation and come home for a while. Carter hesitated. Vacation? His boss barely approved long weekends. I'll figure something out, he said finally. Thank you, sweetheart. Her voice softened, but he could hear the worry underneath. Then, like clockwork, she added, and Carter, maybe while you're home, you could socialize. He groaned. Mom. What? You're 32. You're handsome, smart, and single. Do you know what that makes you in Sherwood? A unicorn? A tragedy, she said flatly. Sonya Jenson is still single, you know. Carter blinked. That name hit him like a hammer to the chest. Sonya Jenson. Hazel eyes, quick smile. The girl who made his teenage brain short-circuit every time she walked into class. He'd teased her mercilessly back then, his awkward version of flirting. Mom, he said slowly. Please tell me you didn't call me about Dad just to. Of course not, Helen said, all innocence. But if you're coming home anyway. Carter pinched the bridge of his nose. I'm hanging up now. Drive safe, she chirped, and the line went dead. When the call ended, Carter stared at the spreadsheet again. The numbers didn't matter anymore. He walked into his boss's office, explained the situation, and, without drama, without anger, submitted his resignation. Just like that, the life he'd built on the West Coast evaporated like steam from his coffee mug. As he packed his things, one thought kept circling in his head like a mischievous bird. Sonya Jenson is still single. Chapter 2. Back to Sherwood. The drive home felt like traveling through time. The city's glass towers gave way to rolling fields, then to sleepy towns with diners that smelled like bacon and nostalgia. By the time Carter crossed the wooden sign that read, Welcome to Sherwood, home of the Archers, he felt like he'd stepped into a sepia photograph. Main Street looked exactly as he remembered. Brick storefronts, hand-painted signs, and the diner that had been serving milkshakes since 1928. People waved from porches. Doors stood unlocked. Life here didn't rush, it strolled. Carter slowed as he passed the diner. The chalkboard outside read, Today's special, burgers, fries, and regret-free milkshakes. He smiled. Sherwood hadn't changed. And maybe that was the point. When he pulled into his parents' driveway, Helen was already on the porch, arms crossed like a general awaiting her soldier. She marched down the steps and hugged him so hard, he thought his ribs might file a complaint. You look too thin, she said immediately. Are you eating real food out there, or just kale and sadness? Nice to see you too, Mom, Carter said, grinning. Helen stepped back, eyes scanning him like a TSA agent. You need meat. And pie. And maybe a woman. Mom. What? I'm just saying, Sonya, stop. Carter held up a hand. I haven't even unpacked yet. Helen smiled sweetly, which was terrifying. Fine, but you'll thank me later. Inside, Clive was in the living room, leg in a cast, scowling at a stack of invoices like they'd personally betrayed him. Boy, you didn't have to quit your job, he grumbled. I'm not dead. No, Carter said, dropping his bag. But you're not exactly hammering out horseshoes either. Clive's scowl softened into a grin. Fair point. Helen hovered like a queen surveying her kingdom. Well, now that you're here, you can help with the store and the festival. Carter blinked. Festival? The Renaissance Festival, Helen said, as if he'd forgotten Christmas. Starts next week. Your father's blacksmith booth is a big attraction. Clive puffed his chest. People come from 3 states just to watch me swing a hammer. Helen rolled her eyes. And since you can't swing anything right now, Carter, you're taking over. Carter laughed. Sure. Why not? I haven't forged anything since college. Helen's smile was too sweet, too innocent. Carter knew that look. It was the same look she wore before springing pop quizzes on unsuspecting third graders. He narrowed his eyes. What aren't you telling me? Helen's expression was pure angel. Nothing at all. Which meant everything. Chapter 3. Enter Sonya. The Renaissance Festival was Sherwood's crown jewel, a 2-week escape into a world of velvet gowns, roasted turkey legs, and people who said things like, "Good morrow," without irony. Carter had forgotten how big it was. The parking lot looked like a medieval invasion, complete with tents, banners, and a guy dressed as a knight trying to parallel park a minivan. By noon, Carter was sweating at the blacksmith booth, hammering a glowing piece of metal while a crowd watched like he was performing surgery. He'd forgotten how heavy the hammer felt, how the heat from the forge wrapped around you like a bear hug. Still, muscle memory kicked in. He swung, sparks flew, and for a moment, he felt like a kid again. Then he heard his mother's voice behind him. "Carter, look who's here." He turned and froze. Sonya Jenson. Same hazel eyes, same smile that had scrambled his teenage brain like eggs in a skillet. She looked even better now, her hair swept up, a simple dress that somehow made her look like she'd stepped out of a storybook. And Carter? Carter looked like a man who'd just forgotten how gravity worked. The hammer slipped from his grip, sailed behind him, and landed with a loud clang. The crowd erupted in laughter. "Part of the show," Carter said quickly, grinning like an idiot. "Interactive blacksmithing. Keeps you on your toes." Sonya laughed, and the sound hit him like sunlight. "Still making an entrance, I see. Still making me look stupid." He shot back, then winced. "I mean, hi." Helen beamed like a cat who'd swallowed a canary. "Sonya's helping at the festival. Isn't that wonderful?" Carter suspected a conspiracy. Sonya probably did too. But neither said a word. Instead, Sonya stepped closer, her eyes flicking to the forge. "So," she said, teasing, "you're the blacksmith now? I thought you were a marketing guy." "I'm versatile," Carter said, picking up another hammer like it was a prop in a bad play. "Marketing by day, medieval craftsman by, slightly later in the day." Sonya smiled, and Carter felt his pulse trip over itself. "Well, let's hope you're better at forging than flirting." The crowd laughed again. Carter grinned, pretending the heat on his face was from the forge. "Oh, trust me," he said. "I'm excellent at both." Eventually, Helen clapped her hands. "You two have fun. I'll just check on the pie booth." And with that, she vanished like a magician leaving behind chaos. Carter turned back to Sonya, suddenly aware of how close she was standing. Close enough to smell her perfume, something light, like citrus in summer. Close enough to remember every stupid joke he'd made in high school, just to see her smile. "So," he said, trying for casual, "you're volunteering?" "Helping your mom," Sonya said. "She's persuasive." "That's one word for it," Carter muttered. Sonya laughed again, and Carter thought, this is going to be interesting. Chapter 4. Sparks and Sarcasm. The second day of the festival dawned bright and loud, Sherwood's version of a royal proclamation. Trumpets blared from the main stage. Someone in tights was juggling flaming torches, and Carter was already sweating before the gates opened. He was setting up the blacksmith booth when Sonya appeared, carrying a tray of lemonade like she'd stepped out of a Renaissance painting, minus the corset. "Thank God." "Morning," she said, her voice warm and teasing. "Ready to impress the masses?" Carter wiped his forehead with the back of his hand. "Absolutely. I've been practicing my dramatic hammer swings. Might even throw in a Shakespeare quote." Sonya raised an eyebrow. "Please don't. The last thing this festival needs is a blacksmith yelling to be or not to be at a piece of metal." "Fine," Carter said, grinning. "I'll stick to T2, brute, when the iron betrays me." She laughed, and Carter felt that now familiar flutter in his chest. He wasn't sure if it was attraction or heat stroke, but either way, he liked it. As the crowd gathered, Carter started his demonstration. He explained the basics: heat, hammer, shape, while Sonya handed out lemonade and smiled at everyone like she'd been born for this. Every time Carter glanced her way, she was laughing with a guest or leaning against the booth, her hair catching the sunlight like a halo. "Careful," she whispered when he swung the hammer a little too close to his thumb. "I don't think the festival insurance covers self-inflicted stupidity." "Thanks for the vote of confidence," he muttered, grinning. "Just looking out for you," she said, her eyes sparkling. "Wouldn't want you to lose a finger. You'd have to change your name to Nine-Finger Carter. Doesn't have the same ring." "Wow," Carter said. "You've been saving that joke, haven't you?" "Maybe," Sonya said, smirking. "I'm a teacher. We plan ahead." The banter flowed easily, like they'd slipped back into the rhythm of high school, minus the awkward teenage hormones, and plus a whole lot of adult awareness. Every time their hands brushed, passing tools, adjusting the forge, Carter felt a spark that had nothing to do with molten metal. By mid-afternoon, the booth was packed. Kids stared wide-eyed as Carter hammered out a pewter spoon, while Sonya explained the history of blacksmithing like she'd been doing it for years. "You're good at this," Carter said quietly when the crowd thinned. Sonya shrugged. "I'm good at talking. Comes with the job." "No," Carter said, his voice softer now. "You make people feel welcome." Her smile faltered for just a second, replaced by something gentler. "Thanks," she said. And then Helen appeared out of nowhere, carrying a basket of pies like a matchmaking fairy godmother. "Look at you two," she said, beaming. "Working together like a dream team." Carter groaned. "Mom, oh, don't mind me," Helen said, setting the basket down. "Just thought you might need some snacks. And maybe a little company." Sonya bit her lip to hide a smile. Carter wanted to hide under the forge. As Helen walked away, humming like a woman who'd just won a battle, Sonya leaned closer. "Your mom's subtle," she whispered. "Like a marching band," Carter muttered. Sonya laughed, and Carter thought, If this keeps up, I'm doomed. And I don't even mind. Chapter 5. Rain, Revelations, and Ridiculousness. By the 5th day of the festival, Carter had learned 3 things. 1. Blacksmithing was a lot harder when you were trying not to stare at Sonya every 5 minutes. 2. His mother had the stealth of a ninja when it came to matchmaking. 3. Renaissance tights should never, under any circumstances, be worn by men over 50. The morning started sunny, but by mid-afternoon, the sky turned the color of old pewter. Carter was finishing a horseshoe demonstration when the first fat raindrops splashed onto his arm. "Oh," Sonya said, glancing up. "That's not good." "Maybe it'll pass," Carter said optimistically. Right before the heavens opened like someone had pulled a medieval lever marked drench everything. The crowd scattered, laughing and shrieking, while Carter and Sonya scrambled to cover the forge. The rain came down in sheets, soaking their clothes in seconds. Carter's shirt clung to him like a desperate ex, and Sonya's hair fell in damp waves around her face. "Great," Carter muttered, wrestling with a tarp. "Nothing says romance like smelling like wet charcoal." Sonya laughed, pushing her hair back. "You're fine. Very rugged." Carter froze mid-tarp. "Rugged?" She smirked. "Don't let it go to your head." They managed to secure the booth, then ducked under the awning, dripping like 2 abandoned puppies. Carter shook his head, sending droplets everywhere. "Careful," Sonya said, laughing. "You're like a sprinkler." "Sorry," Carter said, grinning. "I didn't pack an umbrella. Or a medieval raincoat." Sonya hugged herself against the chill, and Carter noticed the goosebumps on her arms. Without thinking, he shrugged off his damp jacket and draped it over her shoulders. "Carter," she started. "Don't argue," he said softly. "You'll freeze." She looked up at him then, really looked, and for a moment the rain faded into background noise. Her hazel eyes were warm despite the cold, and Carter felt something shift, like a door opening he hadn't realized was locked. "Thanks," she said quietly. "No problem," he replied, his voice lower now. "I owe you for saving me from public humiliation yesterday." "You mean when you almost hammered your thumb off?" "Exactly," he grinned. "Heroic intervention." She laughed, and the tension broke just enough for them to breathe again. Still, something lingered, an awareness that hadn't been there before. The rain kept falling, but neither of them moved. They stood close under the awning, sharing warmth, sharing silence, until Sonya tilted her head and said, "You know, if your mom's plan was to throw us together, she's doing a pretty good job." Carter groaned. "Don't give her credit. She'll start charging admission." Sonya smiled, and Carter thought, if this is what being trapped in a storm feels like, I hope it never ends. Chapter 6. The Dance Under Lanterns. By the end of the first festival week, Sherwood looked like a medieval dream. Lanterns hung from trees, casting golden halos over the cobblestone paths. Music drifted through the air, lutes, fiddles, and the occasional enthusiastic tambourine. It was the annual lantern dance, a tradition that turned the town square into something straight out of a storybook. Carter hadn't planned on going. He was tired, sweaty, and still smelled faintly of forge smoke. But Helen had other ideas. She appeared in the doorway of his room like a benevolent dictator, holding a clean shirt and a smile that could power a small city. "You're going," she announced. "Mom, no arguments. Sonya will be there." Carter groaned. "You're relentless." Helen winked. "You'll thank me when you're waltzing under lanterns." "Pretty sure they don't waltz at Renaissance festivals," Carter muttered, but he changed anyway. The square was alive with color and laughter when Carter arrived. Strings of lanterns glowed overhead, and couples spun in circles to the lively music. Carter scanned the crowd, and there she was. Sonya, in a soft green dress that made her look like spring incarnate, laughing with a group of teachers near the cider stand. For a moment, Carter forgot how to breathe. He walked over, trying to look casual and failing spectacularly. Sonya spotted him and smiled. A smile that hit him like a blacksmith's hammer to the chest. "Look who decided to join civilization," she teased. "I was bribed," Carter said. "There was talk of pie." "Always pie with you," she said, laughing. "Come on, dance with me." Carter blinked. "Dance?" "Yes, dance." She held out her hand, eyes sparkling with challenge. "Unless you're afraid." "Afraid?" Carter took her hand, feeling the warmth of her skin against his. "I'll have you know, I once got a B- in college ballroom." "Impressive," she said dryly. "Try not to step on my feet." They moved into the circle, the music swirling around them like magic. Carter wasn't terrible, mostly because Sonya was good enough to compensate for his occasional missteps. Her laughter bubbled up every time he spun her too fast or missed a beat, and Carter found himself laughing too, the sound mingling with the music and the hum of lantern light. "You're not bad," she said as he twirled her again. "Not bad." Carter grinned. "That's practically a standing ovation." "Don't push it," she teased, but her smile softened, and for a moment, the world narrowed to just the two of them. Their hands, their laughter, the glow of lanterns painting her hair gold. When the music slowed, Carter felt the shift, the kind that makes your heart trip over itself. Sonya's breath brushed his cheek, her eyes meeting his in a way that made everything else fade. He thought about leaning in, about closing the space between them, about Carter. Helen's voice cut through the moment like a trumpet blast. "Don't forget to pick up the pies." Sonya bit her lip, hiding a smile. Carter groaned. "I swear, she has radar." "Maybe she's just invested in your happiness," Sonya said softly. "Or she's running a matchmaking empire." Carter muttered, but his grin gave him away. As they walked off the dance floor, Sonya slipped her arm through his, casual but warm. Carter felt the spark again, the one that had nothing to do with lanterns or music. And he thought, if this is what happiness feels like, maybe Mom's empire isn't such a bad thing. Chapter 7. Almost. The festival grounds were quiet now, lanterns swaying gently in the night breeze like sleepy fireflies. Most of the vendors had packed up, and the laughter of the day had faded into distant echoes. Carter stayed behind to help clean up the blacksmith booth, mostly because his mother had volunteered him before disappearing with a suspiciously smug smile. Sonya was still there too, stacking wooden crates with the kind of efficiency that made Carter wonder if she secretly ran covert operations in her spare time. Thanks for staying, Carter said, lifting a heavy iron stand. You didn't have to. Sonya shrugged, brushing a strand of hair from her face. I like the quiet after the chaos. Besides, you look like you could use the help. Translation, I look pathetic, Carter teased. Not pathetic, she said, smiling. Just determined. In a slightly tragic way. Carter laughed, setting the stand down. That's me, Carter Montgomery. Slightly tragic, mostly determined. Could be worse, Sonya said, handing him a coil of rope. You could be completely tragic, barely functional. True, Carter said, grinning. That's my backup plan. They worked in companionable silence for a few minutes, the night air cool and scented with hay and distant bonfires. Every so often, their hands brushed, passing tools, shifting crates, and each time, Carter felt that spark again, sharp and undeniable. Finally, they finished. Sonya perched on the edge of the booth, swinging her legs like a kid, while Carter leaned against the forge, wiping his hands on a rag. Nice night, she said softly, looking up at the stars. Yeah, Carter said, his voice lower now. Better with company. She glanced at him then, and something in her eyes made his breath hitch. Warmth, curiosity, maybe something more. The kind of look that made you want to say everything you'd been holding back. Carter swallowed hard. This was it. The moment. He could tell her about how he'd always liked her, about how seeing her again felt like finding something he didn't know he'd lost. Sonya, he started, his voice rougher than he intended. A loud crash shattered the quiet. Carter jerked around to see a man in full knight armor tripping over a barrel, his helmet rolling across the grass like a runaway pumpkin. Sorry, the knight called cheerfully, scrambling after it. Sonya bit her lip, trying not to laugh. Carter groaned. Seriously? A knight in shining armor ruins my moment. Maybe it's symbolic, Sonya teased. Chivalry isn't dead, it's just clumsy. Carter chuckled, but the moment was gone, fluttering away like a startled bird. Still, as Sonya hopped down and brushed past him, her hand lingered on his arm just long enough to make his pulse trip over itself. Come on, she said softly. Walk me to my car. Yeah, Carter said, smiling despite himself. Of course. As they strolled through the lantern-lit path, Carter thought. Almost. But next time, I won't miss. Chapter 8. The turning point. By the second week of the festival, Carter had settled into a rhythm. Wake up, hammer metal, try not to embarrass himself in front of Sonya. It was going mostly well. Sure, he'd burned his thumb once and accidentally called a thimble a tiny helmet, but Sonya had laughed, and Carter decided that was a win. Today was quieter. The morning crowd had thinned, leaving the booth bathed in soft sunlight. Sonya leaned against the counter, sipping lemonade, her green dress fluttering in the breeze like something out of a painting. Carter tried not to stare. Failed miserably. You're doing that thing again, she said without looking up. What thing? Carter asked, feigning innocence while adjusting a horseshoe that didn't need adjusting. The thing where you pretend to work so you can avoid admitting you're staring. Carter froze, hammer midair. Was checking the curvature. Sonya smirked. Sure, the curvature of the horseshoe. Not my face. Carter groaned, setting the hammer down. You're ruthless. I'm a teacher, she said, grinning. We notice everything. He laughed, shaking his head. You were like this in high school too. Her smile softened. You remember that? Of course, Carter said, leaning against the forge. You were the smart one. The one who always had the right answer. And I was the idiot who teased you because I didn't know how else to talk to you. Sonya blinked, surprised. You teased me because you liked me? Carter hesitated, then shrugged. Yeah, teenage logic. Not my finest hour. She laughed, the sound warm and bright. Well, you've improved. Mostly. Carter grinned. I'll take it. They fell into easy conversation after that, about everything and nothing. Childhood memories, favorite books, dreams they hadn't told anyone. Carter admitted he wanted to start his own business someday, though he wasn't sure what kind yet. Sonya confessed she'd always wanted to write a children's book, but never found the time. You should, Carter said, his voice earnest. You'd be amazing. She looked at him then, really looked, and something shifted, like the air between them had changed temperature. Her smile was softer now, almost shy. Thanks, she said quietly. Before Carter could say more, a group of kids ran up, demanding to see the magic hammer. The moment broke, but the feeling lingered, warm, electric, impossible to ignore. As the day wound down and the crowd dispersed, Carter watched Sonya pack up the booth, her hair catching the last rays of sunlight. And he thought, I'm in trouble. The good kind. The kind you don't want to escape. Chapter 9. The big gesture. By the second Saturday of the festival, Carter had decided two things. 1. He was officially undeniably falling for Sonya. 2. He needed to do something about it, something that didn't involve awkward half-confessions interrupted by clumsy nights. The idea came to him while polishing a pewter spoon. His dad had always said that blacksmithing wasn't just about strength, it was about shaping something ordinary into something meaningful. So Carter spent the morning at the forge, working quietly while Sonya helped at the school's craft booth across the square. By late afternoon, the booth was buzzing again, but Carter barely noticed. He was focused on the small piece of metal cooling on the anvil, a delicate pendant shaped like an arrow, simple but elegant, with a tiny engraving on the back, Sherwood. A nod to the town, the festival, and maybe, to the way this place had brought them back together. When Sonya returned, wiping paint from her fingers, Carter felt his pulse trip over itself. "Busy day?" she asked, smiling. "Yeah," Carter said, trying to sound casual and failing spectacularly. "Actually, I made something. For you." Her brows lifted in surprise. "For me?" He held out the pendant, suddenly nervous. "It's not much. Just figured you deserved something better than lemonade for all the help you've given me." Sonya took it gently, her fingers brushing his. She turned it over, tracing the engraving with her thumb. "Carter, it's beautiful." He shrugged, trying to play it cool. "Guess I'm not completely useless." She laughed softly, but her eyes were warm, so warm it made Carter's chest ache. "You didn't have to do this." "I wanted to," he said simply. For a moment, neither of them spoke. The festival noise faded into a distant hum, and Carter felt the weight of everything he wasn't saying pressing against his ribs. He wanted to tell her how seeing her again felt like coming home, how she made him laugh in ways he hadn't in years, how he was starting to imagine a future that didn't feel so empty. But before he could find the words, Helen appeared like a matchmaking specter, carrying a tray of pies and humming a victory tune. "Look at you two," she said, beaming. "Sharing gifts. Isn't that romantic?" Carter groaned. Sonya bit her lip, hiding a smile. Helen winked and vanished again, leaving behind the scent of cinnamon and chaos. Sonya slipped the pendant around her neck, her fingers lingering on the chain. "Thank you," she said softly. "Really?" Carter smiled, his heart pounding like a drum. "Anytime." As the sun dipped behind the trees and lanterns flickered to life, Carter thought, "This isn't just a crush. This is something real, and I'm not letting it slip away." Chapter 10. Fireworks and Firsts. The final night of the Renaissance Festival was pure magic. Lanterns glowed like captured stars, music floated through the cool autumn air, and the scent of roasted turkey legs mingled with cinnamon pies. Sherwood had pulled out all the stops, fireworks, a closing parade, and enough merriment to make Robin Hood himself raise a goblet. Carter stood at the blacksmith booth for the last time, hammering out a final keepsake while the crowd thinned. His hands moved automatically, but his mind was elsewhere, on Sonya, on the pendant around her neck, on the way her laugh had become his favorite sound. When the last guest wandered off, Carter wiped his hands and looked around. Sonya was stacking crates, her green dress catching the lantern light like a secret. He walked over, heart thudding like a drum. "Last night," he said softly. She glanced up, smiling. "You'll miss it." "Yeah," Carter admitted. "Mostly the company." Her smile faltered, just slightly, but enough to make his pulse trip over itself. "Me too," she said. They finished packing in silence, the kind that hums with everything unsaid. Then the first firework exploded overhead, painting the sky in gold and crimson. Sonya tilted her head back, eyes wide, and Carter thought, "Now. It has to be now." "Sonya," he started, his voice rougher than he intended. "I need to tell you something." She turned to him, lantern light dancing in her eyes. "What is it?" Carter swallowed hard. Another firework boomed, drowning out his words. Sonya laughed, leaning closer. "What?" Carter grinned helplessly. "Timing hates me." "Try again," she teased. He did. He stepped closer, close enough to feel the warmth of her skin, close enough to smell the faint citrus of her perfume. "I like you," he said simply. "Always have. And these past 2 weeks, I don't want it to end." Sonya blinked, then smiled, the kind of smile that could melt steel. "You're late," she whispered. "Late?" Carter frowned. "I've been waiting for you to say that," she said, her voice soft and sure. And then, finally, he kissed her. No fireworks this time, just the quiet certainty of something real. Her lips were warm, her hands sliding up to his shoulders, and Carter felt the world tilt in the best possible way. When they broke apart, Sonya laughed softly. "Your mom's going to take credit for this." "Let her," Carter said, grinning. "She earned it." Above them, the sky bloomed with color, but Carter barely noticed. For the first time in years, everything made sense. Home, happiness, and the woman who'd just turned his world upside down. Epilogue. 3 months later, Sherwood was quiet under a blanket of early winter snow, the kind that made the town look like a postcard. Carter stood in the hardware store, adjusting a display of tools while his dad barked instructions from the counter like a general who'd reclaimed his throne. "You're putting the wrenches too close to the pliers," Clive grumbled. "They're fine," Carter said, grinning. "You're just bored because you can't boss the forge anymore." Clive snorted. "You think you're clever." "I know I am," Carter said, and ducked before a rag could hit him. Life had changed since the festival. Carter hadn't gone back to California. Instead, he'd started drafting plans for his own business, a custom metal workshop that would serve Sherwood and beyond. It wasn't finished yet, but for the first time, the dream felt real. And Sonya? She was part of that dream. She walked in now, cheeks pink from the cold, carrying a stack of papers. Guess what? She said, eyes bright. I finished the first draft. The book? Carter asked, stepping closer. She nodded, grinning. It's rough, but it's real. Carter kissed her, quick, warm, and full of pride. You're amazing. Helen appeared from the back room like a queen surveying her kingdom, holding a tray of cookies and wearing the smug smile of a woman who'd orchestrated an empire. Look at you too, she said, beaming. My work here is done. Your work? Carter groaned. You've been taking credit for this since the first dance. Helen winked. Because I'm right. Sonya laughed, slipping her hand into Carter's. She's not wrong. Carter squeezed her fingers, looking around at the store, the snow, the town that suddenly felt like everything he'd ever wanted. For years, he'd chased success in glass towers and fluorescent lights. Turns out, happiness was here all along, under lanterns, beside a forge, and in the smile of the woman who'd stolen his heart. And as Helen passed out cookies like victory medals, Carter thought, if this is what home feels like, I'm never leaving again. Afterward, 5 years later, Sherwood hadn't changed much in 5 years. Still the same sleepy streets, the same diner with its regret-free milkshakes sign, and the same Renaissance festival that now drew even bigger crowds. But Carter Montgomery? He'd changed in all the best ways. The custom metalwork shop he dreamed about was now a thriving business, complete with a forge that gleamed like a promise kept. His work wasn't just horseshoes and thimbles anymore. He crafted everything from ornate gates to delicate jewelry, each piece stamped with the quiet pride of a man who'd found his calling. And Sonya? She was sitting at the counter of the hardware store, signing copies of her third children's book while a gaggle of kids waited for autographs. Her first book had launched 2 years ago, and now she was a local celebrity, the kind who still taught at the elementary school because she loved it too much to leave. Helen hovered nearby, passing out cookies like a benevolent monarch, while Clive supervised the festival setup with the same booming laugh that had become Sherwood's unofficial soundtrack. Carter walked in, brushing snow from his jacket, and Sonya looked up with that same smile, the one that had undone him under lantern light 5 years ago. She still wore the pewter arrow pendant he'd made, though now it gleamed beside a wedding band. Ready for the festival? She asked, eyes sparkling. Always, Carter said, leaning down to kiss her, quick, warm, and full of the kind of love that had only deepened with time. Helen cleared her throat loudly. You know, she said, grinning, I still take credit for this. Carter groaned. Mom, don't fight it, Sonya whispered, laughing. She earned it. Outside, lanterns flickered to life, and the first strains of music floated through the winter air. Carter slipped his arm around Sonya, looking out at the town that had given him everything he didn't know he needed. 5 years ago, he'd come home for an accident. He stayed for a future, one that smelled like forge smoke and cinnamon pies, sounded like laughter and lutes, and felt like the steady warmth of Sonya's hand in his. And as the festival lights glowed against the snow, Carter thought, happily ever after isn't a fairy tale. It's this, ordinary days made extraordinary by the right person beside you.